So it's probably not surprising that Daphne from Dalkeith is more likely to have had the jab than Karen from Kwinana. So what are we going to do when the boats start arriving? That's what Andrew Forrest's next dividend check will be from FMG.
Wallabies at Claremont today getting the jab.
All down there with Chris Dawson, part of a PR campaign to make sure we keep rolling up our sleeves. It's a really good thing. The government's hoping the message gets to the outer suburbs and country towns because the stats show the blue bloods of the leafy western suburbs are getting jabbed faster than the rest of us. It's actually a bit of a surprise because the wealthier areas of Perth have been our traditional anti-vax strongholds. Up until a few years ago, richer areas registered just 80% for childhood vaccinations, stuff like whooping cough, well under the 95% target. They've pulled their socks up recently, and the people that were a bit iffy about the MMR jab apparently have no such concern about Pfizer or AstraZeneca. Apparently risking missing out on another European ski season because you don't have a COVID passport is more of a worry than measles, mumps and rubella. Mark McGowan and Roger Cook have themselves to blame a little bit here. We put the main vaccination clinic at the Claremont Showgrounds, the epicentre of the leafy western suburbs. So it's probably not surprising that Daphne from Dalkeith is more likely to have had the jab than Karen from Kwinana. Daphne would have a hard border around the Golden Triangle to stop Karen getting in if she had her way, and popping down the road after picking up some charcuterie from the boat shed is a little easier than spending 90 minutes in peak hour heading north on the freeway. Did you get your jab at the showgrounds?
Redcliffe.
The parking lot at the showgrounds looks like a Barbagallo showroom.
So how do they get the rates up in the battler suburbs?
Put a vaccination clinic down at the Kwinana Motorplex. They're used to getting shots down there. You better edit that out.
Well, why'd you say it?
Karen's the least of McGowan's worries. If we get the AFL Grand Final in Perth, the first question he's going to be asked is, will you let unvaccinated players into the state? If he says no, and a premiership player is stopped at the border, he's got a very serious flashpoint for the anti-vax movement. If he says yes, we all say, well, how come it's good for them and not for us?
AFL players at the border are one thing, Afghani refugees are another.
This is going to make you feel old. It's been 20 years since the Tampa. And if you're under 40, you're probably thinking I'm talking about something that happened in Florida. It's not. It's something that happened off the coast of WA in early August 2001. A Norwegian container ship called the MV Tampa rescued 433 asylum seekers from a sinking boat. John Howard was the PM at the time, and he refused to take them. And we ended up sending the SAS to board the ship to make sure it didn't come to Australia. It's interesting timing for that anniversary because it falls very close to the August 31 deadline that Taliban has given us to get out of Kabul airport. Politicians in Canberra are probably hoping that Al Jazeera stops broadcasting so we don't have to be reminded of what we left behind. But the problem won't go away once the last RAF evacuation plane lands back in Australia.
Why is that?
Well, let's say you're one of the tens of thousands of people who tried to escape but couldn't, like this guy.
See, this happened to me when I was crossing airport.
You're one of the people who may have helped Aussie troops over the past 2 decades. Interpreters, people who worked at Tarankout Base. You may have been a police officer who was trained with the SAS. Are these people going to sit back when the last Hercules leaves Kabul at midnight on Wednesday and think, oh well, I gave it my best shot. Better go home and wait for the knock on the door, wait quietly to be dragged outside and shot in the head, wait for my daughter to become a trophy wife for some murderous Taliban warlord? Probably not. You're probably going to try to get the hell out of there. And if you can't get on a plane, how are you going to do it?
Well, past history would say by boat.
Yep. You're going to get over the border to Pakistan, then you're going to come southeast down to Indonesia, and you're going to do whatever it takes to get on a boat to Australia, because the alternative for many, many people is at best a quick death. And why wouldn't you want to come to Australia? I mean, Australians built hospitals for you. We stopped tribal leaders forcing you to grow opium poppies. We built the first school for girls in the whole of Afghanistan. And the Prime Minister has kind of said he wants to help you.
Despite our best efforts, I know that support won't reach all that it should.
Why wouldn't you think you're welcome here? So what are we going to do when the boats start arriving? Are we going to expel them like we did the Tampa 20 years ago? Are we going to have this perverse situation where we send the SAS to turn away the very people we sent the SAS to save in the first place? Or do we accept them and embolden the people smugglers and risk another wave of deaths at sea? Ask Rudd and Gillard and Rudd again how that ends. Morrison stopped the boats once. As Immigration Minister in the Abbott government, he oversaw Operation Sovereign Borders. It worked. The Australian people backed him then, as they did Howard in 2001. I'm just wondering whether if 20 years of war has changed community attitudes a little bit.
I'm sure Scotty from marketing is doing some market research.
Yes.
You've been watching the markets this week?
We're in the middle of annual profit season. This happens every August. It's when companies show a bit of leg and fess up about how they performed over the past financial year. They spend July sorting out the books and hiding the bad news. It's been a good season. Lots of companies are making a lot of money. We always concentrate on the miners in WA because that's really what makes this state tick. BHP lodged its highest profit in 10 years, 15.5 billion Australian dollars. It's crazy money. Northern Star Resources, this is the company that owns the Super Pit in Kalgoorlie, made more than $1 billion. In 2007, this company's boss, Bill Beeman, was so broke, he sold an exploration shed by putting a flyer on the community notice board at the Halls Creek IGA, and now it's clocked $1 billion.
Crazy. Sounds like everyone's making money.
Not everyone, some people are losing. Qantas is in the hole for $2.3 billion. That came out today, but we expected that. And some companies aren't making as much as you'd think they should. Afterpay's just reported its annual profit. This is the Aussie buy now, pay later success story that was started by a couple of neighbours gas-bagging over their fence in Melbourne 5 years ago. It was in the headlines recently because it was taken over by an American company for $39 billion. Afterpay doesn't even make anything. It just lets people who can't afford things buy stuff they don't need. But it was the biggest takeover in Australian corporate history, bigger than when Wesfarmers took over Coles, where everyone shops. The deal made Afterpay as big as Fortescue Metals Group. Now, FMG's results are out on Monday. It's going to be around $13 billion profit for the year. So how much do you reckon Afterpay made last year?
How much?
$39 million.
Not much.
$39 million.
But they're obviously going to make big profits in the future.
That's the whole idea. If you buy one of these tech stocks, you're putting a lot of faith in future earnings. Canva. This is the local graphic design business headed by Melanie Perkins, who grew up in Duncraig, coincidentally not far from Daniel Ricciardo. Canva's worth $15 or $20 billion. It barely turns a profit. Airbnb, worth 130 billion Australian dollars, lost $93 million last financial year. It was struggling before the pandemic. Even the ones that are in the black are really not making that much. Tesla's worth 970 billion Australian dollars. A company going to Mars worth close to $1 trillion made 1.5 billion.
Nothing.
Barely more than Northern Star Resources out at the Super Pit. Netflix just paid Daniel Craig $140 million to do a couple more movies. It's worth $340 billion. It made less than $2 billion. That's what Andrew Forrest's next dividend check will be from FMG. And he gets one of those every 6 months. I'm Ben Harvey.